Okay, yes, thanks a lot for the invitation and the possibility to speak today here on today's conference. It was very interesting to hear about all the other presentations, especially about the posting directive, and so far, it's a pleasure for us to be here today. So now Mr. Allgaierr and I would like to share with you our experiences to combat fraud in the construction sector in Germany. And we structured our presentation that way that at first we will tell you some things about our organizations, who we are, what we do, and then give you some figures about our sector, and after that to give you an overview about the methods we deal with in Germany to struggle against social fraud. And at least we would like to give you some ideas too about things we would like to have as social partners in the construction sector, because we cannot do things alone. We need the legislator in most cases. So let us begin with the presentation of our organization. So as it said, my name is Kandaouroff and I'm working for the German Construction Confederation in Germany. It's on the right side, the Zentralverband Deutsches Baugewerbe. We are an employers association. And you see, we've got two employers associations in Germany. It's the HDB2. They represent the very large companies, and we, on the other side, represent the ZDB, the small and medium-sized companies. And Mr. Allgaierr represents the trade unions. Before he gets to the point, I will shortly show you our structure in ZDB, because we do not have direct members in Germany, we have indirect members in Germany. So in Germany is a federal republic, and so the federal states, we have 16 federal states in Germany. And our members are the representatives of the federal states in Germany, and the companies are members in our members, let's say it that way, and so we just have an indirect membership. Our organization is in Berlin. The reason is why are we in Berlin? Because the legislator sits in Berlin, and so we can do our lobbying activities quite easier that way. On this sheet, you see the company size is a structure of the member enterprises in the construction sector. So altogether, there are around about 74,000 companies in the construction sector in Germany. Most of them only have very few employees. So you see this way, only 76% have just 1 to 9 employees, and only nearly 1% have more than 100 employees in Germany. And so you see the structure, we are a very small and medium-sized sector in Germany. What is our activity? As I said, we have 3 key areas. We do a lot of lobbying, not only lobbying in law things, but only lobbying in technical topics, for example. Then you see we are a technical association too. And this is the most important point, we are an employer association, and that means we do collective bargaining. And a lot, very hard collective bargaining, let me say it this way. We have a very good social partnership, because often our interests are the same, but not always. For example, we have a lot of collective agreements dealing with minimum wage, for example, and there the positions are not always the same with the trade union. So then I'd like to give the floor to...
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I try to... my name is Antonius Allgaierr, and I'm from the German trade union. So we are social partners, and we are very glad to be here today in the Arapazis, which is for us a place where we can bury the conflicts and share with you together our experiences by combating fraud in Germany. So thank you very much for the invitation. And as trade union, we are responsible not only for construction sector, this is one of our main sectors we are responsible for, but also to building materials in industry, Then the cleaners is another great sector we are responsible for. And after reunion in the 90s, we are also responsible for agriculture and forestry. All these branches have more or less one common thing. They have much to do with undeclared work, with small entities, small employers, and many precarious labor relations. So, main activity, trade union, we are bargaining collective agreements with our social partners in all these fields, and our philosophy is just being responsible not only for our members, but also be responsible for the social coherence of the system overall. So, the organization of IG Bau is very classical for a trade union. We get many employees as members, and then we get a federal board in the center in Frankfurt, and and then in the regions, in the 16 regions, we get 12 individual regional boards. Okay, so that's for me for my presentation. I'm from Frankfurt, and afterwards I will explain you together with Frau Kandaouroff what we do against fraud.
Okay, so on this sheet you see that in 1995, for example, there were a lot of employees in the construction sector, and since 2016, it nearly dropped to the half. So there are only 767,000 employees in the construction sector in the moment, around about. It increases, this data at the moment, but you see that it really dropped to the floor. So. The reason was the crisis, of course. There were a lot of people were dismissed during the crisis from 1995, beginning 1995, and this was the reason why there are not so many employees in the construction sector yet. I would like to skip the economy because we do not have enough time. And so I would like now to give you an explanation about the methods in Germany to tackle illegal work in the construction sector. So all in one, you can say that we have an immense problem with illicit work in Germany, and illicit and illegal work because, at the moment, the figure is stable by around about 27% of the turnover in the construction sector. And as you see, it is an immense problem because it damages all the employees and, of course, the companies who act properly. And all in one, you can say that we did a lot in the past, the social partners together with the legislator and the ministries, but it is not enough yet. There's still the huge problems, and we are confronted with lots of obstacles in practice. And you can say that the forms of appearance of illicit work, they are diverse. It begins with construction works without a bill. That's one thing, and ends in mafia structures. We especially have lots of construction sites, especially in Frankfurt, as one example, but all over in Germany. And one of the biggest problems at the moment in Germany is the bogus self-employment. And so please now let me show you some methods how we tackle this problem. The first method is we have got some liability regulations in Germany. There are four. In fact, there are four. We have a liability for construction minimum wage, for contributions for holiday funds, and social security contributions, and the national minimum wage. Let me show you the regulation in detail, because a very important regulation of liability is the liability for the minimum wage. In the construction sector, the regulation was implemented in our national law 20 years ago, and must be seen together with our collective agreements, because we have collective agreements referring to a minimum wage. At the moment, we have a minimum wage one from round about €11.75, and we have a second minimum wage in Germany. We have got two in the construction sector, and that lies by €14.75. And this minimum wage applies only for blue-collar workers, not for white-collar workers. And it is important to say that it is a chain liability, regardless of fault. In this context, we have got another liability, and this refers to the national minimum wage. That has nothing to do with our collective agreements, but this national minimum wage lies by €8.84 at the moment, and it applies for white-collar workers and blue-collar workers who do not fall under our minimum wage. So, and this is a chain liability regardless of fault too. The third liability refers to the holiday funds contribution. This is a chain liability too, but you have the possibility to exclude the liability. So we spoke with our ministry and with Soka Bau how we can realize this. And in fact, we have got two possibilities to exclude the liability. On the one hand, the subcontractor is pre-qualified, and on the other hand, if they have a so-called Enthaftungsbescheinigung. It's a German horrible word, but this is one possibility how to exclude the liability. And last but not least, it's the fourth regulation. It's a liability for social security contributions. So in Germany, you have to pay, everyone has to pay a special amount to our social security institutions, and for unemployment insurance, for pension insurance, health insurance, and compensation insurance. And in case the employer does not pay these contributions, the direct employer can be claimed insofar to pay it. And upon this liability for social security contributions. These are the four regulations we have referring to liability. And a second method we have in Germany is that there's the obligation for everyone you meet in Germany, every person you meet in Germany on the construction site, that they carry an identification paper with them, for example, the passport. And in the past, people had to carry the social security card with them, but in 2009, the legislator introduced this obligation to carry the identification card, because it's easier to see, okay, this is the person I really have got in front of me and I can check them. So the social security card was a problem because often it was falsified in the past. There's another method we have since 2015, so it's a very young method. The legislator introduced an obligation for the trade offices to check business registrations for indications for self-bogus employment. For example, one indication is when 20 people are registered at the same place in the same house. Then often you think, okay, that's perhaps a problem. And then the trade officers have to forward these notes, so they see, okay, these are the 20 people, and then they give these hints to the custom authorities, and then they check if there's a self-bogus employment case here. And another thing we developed some years ago, the social partners developed with the ministry a formula where everyone, when you go on the street and you see, okay, that looks a bit like illicit work, they can fill it out and then send it to the social partners or directly to the custom authorities. And so the custom authorities can check these hints in case.
So another tool to just combat fraud is for us the obligation to note working time to control the minimum wage. That's very important for us, and we had argued very strong, especially at the general minimum wage, to just make sure that these obligations come also to this general minimum wage. It's sure if you get a wage per hour, you have to. Working time is crucial, and so every employer is obliged to note the working time, and we are going to have in some regions. We look to Sweden, and we've seen that their technical progress is further on, and we just going to start also processes to implement online app-based working time notifications. So this is the future. Now it's only paper, and but this is also for controlling through the customs very crucial for us. Another tool we got implemented is exclusion from public procurement contracts. Public procurement is a very huge market for construction employers. A third of construction work is conducted by public procurement contracts. So it's very important that the German public, the state, controls also with the possibilities in these contracts that on their sides, on the public construction sites, there is no fraud and there is paid at minimum the minimum wage. We've seen in the last years on European level certain movement. There are revised public procurement directives, and now we've heard we got a new revised posting workers directive, and we are hopeful that we can achieve in various regions, starting there, also the possibility to make sure that not only minimum wage is paid on public construction sites, but also the wages which we bargained by our collective agreements. So this is a new political movement, I think, and we're checking it. And maybe we can start earlier than 2020, but that's not sure. Okay. Well, but the existing exclusion we get if there is if on a public construction site minimum wage is not paid, the contractual collective minimum wage, these employers cannot apply to any public procurement for it differs up to 3 years. They are excluded, so that's very important. And also last year we have implemented a nationwide register for these employers. They are going to be registered there, and every public procurement authority has to check whether there is an employer in this blacklist or not before giving the contract to the employer. So. Okay. Yeah, and that's for the practical things on the construction sites. If there are controls, they are not pre-announced, then the employees have to just cooperate with the customs officers who control the construction sites, and they have to give all the informations that are necessary to just make the picture full, whether there is fraud or not. And so that's also very important, not only to give the information who is on the construction site, but also all documents which are necessary to check whether minimum wages are paid. For example, the notifications of the work time, then the labor contract, and so on. As I said before, the customer officers can control without suspicion. They can just check before they go to the construction site. Also, all documents available at the national authorities. And so they can go to the construction site whenever they want, wherever they want. And so these possibilities for the construction, for the customer officers are very, very, very good. Okay. The last point from my point of view, we just together with the employees associations and together with the national authorities, the national ministry, which is responsible for the customs, for the controls, we just formed an alliance to combat undeclared work, and we meet together some more, three, 4 times a year together at high level, just to see what happened in the last weeks or month, what can we make better on national level, also on regional level. These meetings take place. That's also a very important thing, just to include also the point of view of the social partners and bring them together with the control authorities.
Last but not least, I told you that we will speak about things we want to have in Germany because we see the problems. We see the problems with illegal work is still there with fraud on the European level, but also on the national level. And so we want a lot, and we have got some demands. We wrote up shortly here. On the one hand, we want specialized public prosecution officers. So, because the reason is that that makes prosecution more efficient in practice. So, and on the other side, we need a better network between the European member states, between the European authorities, because we often hear from the custom authorities that, for example, in Germany, someone asks. In France, for example, wants an information about a company, and they do not get an answer. And when they get an answer, they are far away. They're not here anymore in Germany. And that's a huge problem that depends from member state to member state and from case to case. But I think the exchange between data must get better. And it must be lived in member states, because when you have a look on the enforcement directive, there was a regulation who said, okay, the data exchange has to be better. When a member state asks for information, the other member states has to answer within a special time. But in fact, that in practice, it isn't lived yet. Furthermore, we have problems with the A1 formula, and so you all know that often it is falsified, and following the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, member states cannot do a lot against it, because it's only within to initiate a very long process against it, and so there must be better forms to make A1 formulas that they cannot be falsified.
So, I told you before that in public procurement we have special controls by the procurement authorities, but this is not nationwide. So there are some places where it works, but it's very hard to make sure that the many authorities just are beware of the problem and make the controls, and also control minimum wages on their public construction sites. So we hope that we can do it better in future by just obliging them to make these controls and to sanction if there is fraud on construction sites of public procurement. Another problem we faced since 2004, when the Master Craftsman certificate was abolished on behalf of former Schröder government, it was a very big problem for us and for many craftsmen, especially Tyler's craftsmen. That was a craft which was very strong before, and afterwards we have seen that these Tylers now are mostly bogus self-employed. There are almost no bigger employers left, because everybody can now be a Tyler, yeah, without any certificate, any educational certificate, and so many of them they don't have also the chance to make their work value what it is worth, and so we just are glad that the government now in the coalition treaty has set this on the agenda again to check whether the abolition of the master craftsman certificates was okay or not, and we see many branches, especially in construction industry, where it was disaster. Yeah. And last not least, we just since many years together with our social partners argue that the customs authority staff is not enough. We have the common minimum wage since 2015, and the customs authorities are also responsible to control the national-wide minimum wages. So, and there are only about 6,500 customers in all over Germany, so we have to increase the staff. We have to make sure that controls are effective all over Germany. And that's the effectiveness for the customs authorities. They have to work more closer with our institutions, with Sokabau and with the, especially with the public pension fund, DRV Bund, where the data of the labor relationships on the construction sites is there's a very good picture, but customs officers often cannot have the insight of this picture. So we have to improve communication of the authorities also in Germany, but I think also in Europe. Another short point, very special. We have many self-employed, as I told you before, for example, Tylers, and there is no mandatory insurance for pension yet, and we are glad or happy that also the actual government has in the coalition treaty focused on that problem, and we can have a solution also based on collective agreements for these self-employed people working on construction sites.